Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 16th of August 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Patrick Henningsen. Patrick, good as always to have you back. And you've been travelling. You've been overseas. You've been to Germany, Norway, and to Russia. So I'm just going to cover the weather, and then I'm going to say, tell us a little bit about your travels.
Okay.
Well, the good news is the sun is shining here in Plymouth. We've got yet another summer's day. I did note this morning that a few leaves are beginning to fall off the trees, so that would be the fall in your terms, or autumn in UK. And we've been told that the weather's looking good in Pembrokeshire and other places. So we can afford to be pretty cheerful on that front, at least today. So you've been overseas. Where do you want to start? Germany or Norway or Russia?
It's interesting being on the continent, especially with all the news going on. Part of my trip was I was doing research for a commissioned article on the migrant crisis, and specifically about the string of so-called ISIS attacks in Germany,
right?
Train attacks and so forth. And so I was investigating that, and I'll release a piece on that on my website pretty soon. But what I found in my investigation was very interesting. We can talk about that later in the show, perhaps. Norway was fascinating.
Right.
Stopped by the Nobel Peace Prize Center. And that was very interesting as well. I talked about that on my show, Brian.
Well, that 21st century wire was just quite incredible with those reports from inside Syria.
Yeah, it was very powerful.
I think that made a big impact on a number of people.
Yeah, it's one thing to watch live correspondence on the mainstream media, but when you have a chance to do it yourself with a small organization like ours, then it's something else, and you really can feel the importance of that reporting and also what's going on. There was mortar fire and things like this in the background. So you worry about the safety of the people who are working or reporting there.
Yeah.
But we're lucky to be able to do that through cell phones and make connections on the ground in places.
And it's real reporting because it's coming in live on the ground, and this can be done without millions of pounds worth of satellite gear now.
Yeah, and there's no producers, no middlemen filtering or saying what telling
the policy
people.
Is.
Yeah, it's not happening. It's just raw from the ground to me. No middleman, no filtering, nothing like that. So, but visited Russia for the first time. Beautiful city. I mean,
St. Petersburg.
Very impressive. Very impressive. I mean, it just. I had no idea how big that city is, B, how old it is, and the different layers of history.
Yeah.
And I want to definitely go back and visit it again in the future. But I encourage people. It's stunning.
Right.
Really. In Europe cities, I would say in the top 5 in the European cities.
And this is part of the Russia that Western media would have us believe is some sort of backward nation.
No.
Okay. Well, let's hop from Russia over to the States, because this is the first article that you've picked up on from the Los Angeles Times. And Donald Trump is, he's back on security and terrorism, isn't he?
Yeah, this is a big talking point. And if you speak to especially people who are in the Hillary Clinton camp, this is one of the first things that Donald Trump's detractors will point to. And again, we see a renewal of this kind of call for a Muslim ban, although he's sort of tweaked it now, recast it, as the headline says here, the LA Times. Donald Trump recast Muslim ban by calling for extreme vetting. What exactly is extreme vetting? No one seems to know. How long is a piece of string? The point with Donald Trump and all these crazy ideas that he keeps coming out with to get press media attention is that you can't have a ban on people of certain religions. A, because how do you do a religious test? You can't. B, it's illegal. It's constitutional. He would have to change the law in the United States. It's not going to happen. So how people are actually getting all bent out of shape about this, it shows you how people in the media are following rhetoric. And we're trained now. The public is, this is a perfect example, Brian. They're trained to follow the rhetoric and not the substance of it. So you can argue all you want about Donald Trump and this, how horrible this would be, but it's not going to happen in the United States, not under the current governmental legal system. Right. They would have to fundamentally change pass constitutional amendments, which is not going to happen with the Supreme Court that currently sits.
Yeah.
So why everyone's got their self in a twist over this is just shows you how kind of adolescent the media and the political process is becoming in America, which itself is that's more frightening than Donald Trump, in my opinion.
Right. Now, what about Hillary? Because we got the two heads on that screen there. I noticed that Hillary's in blue, usually regarded by the Americans as the good guys. The blue forces are the good guys, and the reds are the reds, of course. But Hillary Clinton, I've been seeing some very interesting little YouTube clips suggesting that her health is not good at the moment. There's one showing her having some sort of spasm in front of reporters. There's another one where she has to be helped up or down podium steps. And then it's emerged that she's broken into quite intense coughing fits at several of the major talks. She looks pretty rough. Do you think there's any substance in this, in claims that she's in very bad physical health?
I've seen a lot of reports going back to when she had the head injury, the concussion, allegedly during a plane flight. In December, then she went missing. This was 2 years ago.
Right.
Well, I think while she was Secretary of State, I think. So it's, ever since then, you've been seeing these sort of Hillary Clinton health scare reports. I personally don't see anything major right now to report on this. I see a lot of reports coming out of the sort of the usual sources from the other side. But if you're wishing that a health scare is going to derail the Clinton campaign, you'll be still holding your breath till after she gets inaugurated in January. The fact of the matter is, the one who's really looking worse for wear is Bill Clinton. And a lot of people have commented on this, not just Republicans and Trump supporters, but just generally. I've seen a lot of people who have no stake in the game saying Bill Clinton looks like he has aged like a lifetime in the last couple of years, and so there would be a big concern about his health.
So there's stuff catching up on them from the past?
I don't know, but it's a fast-paced lifestyle in politics in the U.S.
Okay.
Globe-trotting, and I don't want to get into Bill Clinton's proclivities, which are probably well known, at least in the alternative media. But certainly, it could be a case of the past catching up, as it sometimes does.
Okay. Well, presumably he won't be having Obamacare to sort him out. And on that subject, we'll hop back to UK and The Guardian here, which is suggesting, I found this header quite incredible. Feet first, our NHS is limping towards privatisation, to which I say, no, it's not. It's being driven towards privatisation at the speed of light. So is Polly Toynbee, is she really up to date with what's going on, or is this spin?
Well, go just flash up this Guardian article again. This is the problem with the Guardian in general. Is this very subtle spin is applied to just about every issue. Brian, how many times have you seen stories spun in this very subtle way? What she's trying to say is this: we're heading into a crisis. The point is, we listened to Radio 4, one of the major radio stations this morning, coming into work, Brian. And they're saying, the waiting times for basic routine surgeries, it's just too long, and the government's no longer finding the NHS regional centers for late waiting times because of budgetary worries, so they're going to let the waiting queues extend. What is this just setting up for paying for fast-track surgery?
If you're worried and you've got enough fear factor, then you're going to pay, aren't you, to get yourself through the system? 150,
200 pounds, whatever they're going to charge. That's the beginning of privatization. But Brian, you've been saying this on this show for years. They have been nudging the NHS towards, in large parts of it are already privatized, Brian.
Huge parts. And of course, the other thing is that the NHS still has its European office, because it felt it was so important to retain communications, this is their words, with the European supply market, that they had an NHS office, a major office set up there some years ago.
So don't be surprised if you're going to see these talking points now flashing on radio and on print, on TV. Crisis. There's a crisis. They're pumping up this idea of a crisis in the NHS. Meanwhile, they've never spent more money in this decade.
Well, 100 billion is what's being pumped in.
Than ever before. And to say that, is this just because more people are using the service? No, because money is hemorrhaging out of this organization into consultants, private contractors, corporations.
Locums, so temporary staff coming in. Yeah.
And this all happened, I think this really started in a big way under the Blair 12 years of the Blair government.
Well, on that theme, we'll just remind people, of course, that it is only the UK column that has been pointing out the penetration of common purpose into the NHS. And this fantastic article by Martin Edwards still stands because this has got the detail on how common purpose was put into the grain of the NHS. And then they have continually pushed this corporate commercial agenda from inside the NHS, with one woman saying that what we need is 1 million change agents. Well, no, they don't. They need competent staff who are going to look after the sick and the people who've got health problems. But what's gone into the centre of the management structure is an organisation which is pushing commercialisation.
I think the
it's
NHS
doing a bit of a Hillary there.
It's been earmarked for privatization for a long time, Brian.
Yeah.
And I think we're just starting to see the signs of that sort of.
Well, it's just coming up to the surface.
Taking shape now, yeah.
Well, if we're worried about the NHS, we shouldn't be worried about Britain because apparently we're in the safe hands of Boris Johnson, you've discovered.
Well, this is a great feel-good story here. Theresa May is off on holiday. I'm not sure where she's gone, but I'm sure it's a nice sunny place. And Boris Johnson, so here's another headline in The Guardian, and again, I'm worried about The Guardian, Brian, this is a non-story. Boris Johnson on standby to lead the country while May is on holiday. Are we expecting, is there a crisis that's going to break out at the end of August here? And then we've got a picture of Boris, and quite frankly, he doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, Brian,
No.
especially with some of the things he's said.
Well, he's only on standby to lead. They're not actually, to be fair to The Guardian, they're not actually saying he's capable of leading. He's only on standby.
But really, The Guardian, Brian, to be critical of The Guardian, they should be more critical of these ministers, of people like Boris Johnson. What are his credentials to lead the country?
Well, he hasn't.
That's what they should be asking. But you'd be hard-pressed to find a writer at any of these newspapers that's really going to take the government to task. This is kind of new celebrity journalism with politics that's come in.
Yeah.
They're more concerned about what fashion they're wearing or what their hairstyle's like. Well, we're commenting on Boris's hair, but that's another story. But there's little challenge coming from the media these days.
They're short.
That's my opinion.
They're short.
Anyway.
They're past it. Mainstream media is past it because they either just don't report or they don't understand what they should be reporting. So let's remind ourselves of what the Prime Minister is really about. And I think this is key because it's Theresa May that has installed this phenomenal state spying system inside UK. She is the woman who set it up. She now moves up in the post of Prime Minister so she can start to enact this thing. So the inset there is a number of organisations which include Met Police Security Services, and some very interesting databases which are connecting local authority information. Cameron, of course, was calling for more state spying power. So this was a historical call when Theresa May was Home Secretary. She set up the Prevent. So if we've got Trump talking about more extreme measures to counter these so-called terrorists, Theresa May went into the heart of the country with Prevent, which police are themselves saying is helping to create unrest and semi-terrorist thoughts. Then we've got GCHQ doing a little deal with your guys in America, if I may say so. And what are we doing? Selling data to the highest bidder. Well, that's all pretty mucky stuff. And then it gets even more complicated because we've got Francis Maud and Letwin previously in the Cabinet Office, who were doing deals with Israeli intelligence services, bringing them into partnership with GCHQ and British intelligence services themselves. So this is just an incredible network. And for anybody to now be looking at UK and saying we're still a democracy, this is a joke. And what is this? This is actually the big society that Cameron's talked about.
Yeah.
We're only a small nation state, Patrick. When we think of the population of America and the amount of land people are spreading, UK, we are packed in now. And the effect of this type of spying, I would suggest, is 10, 100 times worse in UK than it would be in America.
If you look at the per capita spending in a country like Britain on things like surveillance, spying, and the pretext for this, of course, is terrorism. For basically everything. This is the only reason they ever give for any program or any new sort of budget item that's coming in, or any new thing like Prevent Strategy or the Channel Project, which was the predecessor of that with the Metropolitan Police. But it's always terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. The amount of money, the amount of resources, Brian. So you have all these other departments around the country, the NHS, and they're all in education. We're scrounging for pennies. Children don't have enough paper. They don't have the right computers. They're not being prepared for the next generation of technology. And yet, if you say it's for terrorism, if you say it has to do with clamping down on terror, the money just appears out of thin air.
Yeah.
And they sign it right off. So this is what we've got. And of course, it's not going to be used to stop terrorism, Brian. Eventually, any state that erects this sort of apparatus will turn it on its own population.
Yeah, absolutely.
And members of government will turn it on the opposition, and they'll be all spying on each other, and everyone's in one office looking at the other person in the other office, tapping public officials' telephone calls.
Fear and suspicion. And
This is what happened with the NSA in America. You can, if you're in power, direct the NSA to tap the phone of your opposition.
Yeah.
And so what are we left? That's a hugely dysfunctional democracy at that point.
Yeah.
Very dangerous and very expensive, and it's a huge problem.
It's a huge problem. Money, no object. Money, no object when it comes to conventional defence. So let's bring in Russia, because, of course, the Russians have been accused of being backward nation. They are the nation that spies on its own citizens. Well, we've just learned something about ourselves. But there's some big shocks to do with American perception now of Russian military equipment.
Yeah, and you go to any of these defense shows right now, and some of the big buyers are normally Arab countries. They're very interested in what Russia's got in their wares. So this is the new Tu-22M3 backfire bomber. They're basing this in Iran.
Yep.
So to do strikes on ISIS in Syria. So Russia's got incredible operability now on mainland Syria, Iran, Caspian Sea. Incredible. And like their fighter jet, which was just unveiled, the latest version of the T-50, Sukhoi T-50 stealth fighter, outperforming everything.
Yeah.
So this NATO does not have military superiority based on the equipment that we have on the NATO side.
Yeah.
And so what's going on? What's Russia's annual defense budget? 90 billion.
It's a fraction of the US.
90 billion, and the US spends 600. That's just not including the black budget projects. 600 billion.
Yeah.
And how can Russia produce a fighter and a backfire bomber that outperforms, and cruise missiles that outperform what the UK, what the US have? How's that possible?
My quick answer to how is because they have a defence specification. They've then got a procurement system which is professional and does its job, and they carry on and work through the project. Where in the West we've got utter chaos in defence procurement, to the extent that now in Britain we can't even build a fleet of ships that work in warm water.
We have corporations bleeding the national budgets, contractors bleeding national budgets with boondoggle projects, fighter jets that they promised going to go to Mars and come back, and they're not living up to their billing, basically. F-35, perfect example. Total cost by the end of the day will be around $1 trillion by the time the first round of that rolls out off the assembly line. So over these years.
Yeah.
Trillion dollars.
So some shocks here, and yet we're told that we need all of this spying, we need GCHQ, we need all of our spying capability to tell us what these people, the Russians, are up to, but we don't seem to be able to do that.
Or what ISIS is up to.
Or, well, we're to believe they can tell us who's riding a motorbike in the middle of Syria, but they can't quite work out what Russia's doing with its defence budget. This is nonsense. Very interesting article here that was passed through to us. This is from shtfplan.com. What I like about this article is it's got source material in it, but it's basically saying that Russia's unveiled a secretive new technology that could give it the upper edge in clandestine operations and electronic warfare. Electronic warfare is the key, and this article links through to this one from The Independent, where we've got Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, the commander of the US Army in Europe. He's described Russian advances in electronic warfare in Syria and Ukraine, a field in which they were typically supposed to be backward. I find that an interesting comment, but he says, well, now their performance is eye-watering. So this is, in my mind, Patrick, a mixture of arrogance and sheer ignorance by senior military people, because, of course, the moment you start to underestimate an adversary, the adversary's got the upper hand. This is incredible, really, that we're seeing a West which says that its spying ability is second to none, but they don't know what the Russians have been doing.
It's not only that, the minute you start intimidating your adversary unnecessarily, you're only motivating your adversary to come up with solutions to better their other side, which is in this case would be NATO.
Yeah.
But this is only begins here, Brian. We'll talk about China in a minute. Talk about eye-watering, what the Chinese are developing right now in the terms of information warfare and information technology is unbelievable.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, let's have a change of subject to the church. And what's the relevance of this? Well, a number of people have been challenging the Church of England for simple non-performance in a range of areas. And this is becoming of interest. We can actually contrast it with President Putin at the moment, who in general seems to be standing up for the church in Russia. But what's been happening here in UK, and in particular with regard to Archbishop Welby of the Church of England. And I'll just read you a little piece of this email. It says, Archbishop, it's becoming clear an unworthy element has placed itself in British society to purposely harm our children and our Christian morals. In addition to the major networks of the sex abuse of children within our establishment, there are people who partake in satanic rituals, abusing adults and children as a matter of course in these rituals. And in the email, it goes on to identify a number of cases that are reported. The aim of this is to say, well, this is not some myth. Let's look at cases that have been reported. So it's talking about Telford, it's talking about Liverpool, it's talking about Swansea, and it's talking about Truro in Cornwall. And then it ends by pointing out that, of course, Satanism has been approved in the Royal Navy. Now, that is an interesting factor, if I just digress, because I picked up from the internet that Satanism was approved in the US Navy back in 1976, I think it was.
The 70s, yeah.
Yeah, which I didn't know at all.
So there's a subculture within the military, within an institution like that, satanic subculture,
Yeah.
I think. Call it a religion. Some people would call it a religion. I'll call it a subculture.
Right.
A corrupt subculture.
Okay. So basically, we've got people now saying that there's something deeply sinister operating in society, and that was just the end of it. I would like to know what measures you are taking to ensure the rise of Satanism is stopped. So you would have thought that the head of the Church of England would be quite interested in this subject and would be responding, but the opposite appears to be happening, that we have Archbishop Welby running away. Bring in the bankers. So let's have a look at this. Now, this is going back to 2014, but I'm very grateful for the person who sent it through to us. It's the Church Times, and the headline is Plan to Groom Talent for High Office in the Church of England. So I've got a little bit of analysis on this, Patrick, but you pick up something just from that headline, don't you? That we are going to groom people, interesting word, so that they're suitable to take up positions of high office. What do you think that means?
Yes, identifying future leaders. So what is what's the qualification for being on the talent list?
Yeah.
This is the big question. What boxes must one tick next to their name to be considered talent worthy of grooming?
Grooming, yeah.
For leadership positions. That's actually the fundamental. That's what I'm interested in the answers to.
Well, we can have a look. We can answer that partly from a little bit of work that we've done here. But let's remember that it was David Cameron who said that people who were going to have a position of importance in the Conservative Party were going to do Briggs-Meyer psychometric tests, so that they wanted to know about these people. So we saw that within the higher levels of party politics, we're going to have specially selected and groomed people. Now we can see this coming into the church. Well, who's pushing this in? Let's meet the man, because here he is, Lord Green, the former group chairman for HSBC Holdings, is the man leading this initiative in the church. They're going to spend, that should be £2 million talent management budget for the Church of England Leadership Initiative of 2014. So don't worry about the starving people. We've got a quick 2 million. And it's going to be talent management for, you were right, future leaders, and leadership development for bishops and deans. And what is all this going to do? We're going to be building healthy organisations, leading growth and reinventing the ministry. So we've got a banker that's helping the Church of England to reinvent itself. Do you get a warm feeling from this?
Not really, considering the fact that most of the churches in this country are empty.
Yes.
So we have a country of empty churches. We don't have anybody practicing Christianity per se, very little, in fact, compared to the amount of churches. But then we have the church, which is an institution.
Yeah.
So no religion, really, per se, no faith, no attendance on Sunday, but a big institution. And this institution is very politicized.
And very wealthy.
And very much a part of politics and the social entrepreneur aspect of it, which you talked about, very much goes in line with some of these programs that we're describing here, financed by some of the, or staffed by bankers, the connection, God, banker.
Yeah, it doesn't fit too well, does it?
Oil, church with Welby as well, former oil executive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's very interesting.
But he was called to the ministry, but he's going to change the ministry. So let's have a look at some of the detail of this, because it's remarkable. We've got reinventing the ministry, and how they're going to do it. They're going to introduce culture change. What sort of change? Well, they're going to go for the common good. They're going to reshape the ministry, and they're going to lead the church for growth. I think I need a new pair of spectacles, actually, Patrick, because there's a typo there, and I didn't see that earlier, but we'll carry on through there. We've got the DAG, the Development and Appointments Group. We've got the talent pool. Now, this is interesting. This is where they, whoever they are going to be looking at people in the church and selecting them. 150 high potential individuals are being selected for an intensive 5-year training. Wow, that's going to take you into Christianity and proper spiritual matters. They've got to show early promise, exceptional potential. They've got to be ready now. So these are the key people. They're ready now. And they're also going to set up an alumni network to track these people. They're going to have a database, always handy. And then this will produce mentoring and coaching system for, there we are, future leaders.
This seems to me like a corporate sort of structure here, social enterprise structure. What happened to seminaries and monasteries?
Yeah.
There's no mention here of the studying spiritual literature, guidance, history.
Being meek or looking after the sick and
humble.
Yeah, humble. No, this is to do with international banking, but it's really the church. Somebody's a little bit ahead of us, actually, in the chat box, and I'll explain why in a minute. But let's just remind ourselves that the Archbishop is very good at hobnobbing with bankers, whether it's Lord Green, or we've had reports here from the Ecumenical News where he was having a little social event with Mr. Carney from the Bank of England and
the lovely Christina Lagarde.
Yeah, Christina Lagarde. I believe that she's charged with some sort of fraud thing at the moment.
Yeah,
I can't imagine that the Archbishop knew that at the time he was sat next to her.
She's not difficult to miss with that orange skin tone.
Yeah. So there we are, the man who's leading the nation spiritually, and I just thought we'd bring in the basic thing, which was that Jesus said to his disciples, "Verily I say unto you that a rich man shall hardly enter the kingdom of heaven. And again I say unto you, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." So I'm a little bit puzzled as to what's going on in Mr. Welby's head. But we notice he doesn't want to answer any questions on Satanism. Now, what that means, I don't know.
I think they're planning for a lot of camels to be passing through the eye of the needle.
Or the needles are bigger than they used to be.
Yeah, they've widened the needle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably it. Or the camels are smaller, maybe.
Okay, well, not to worry, because, of course, David Cameron said he was going to solve the problem. So let's bring in David Cameron. And this was the Independent reporting him some time ago, because he called the police because nasty food bank campaigners were getting in the way of his local constituency office. So that was a bit embarrassing. But what we're interested in here is that David Cameron said in the Church Times that Britain should be evangelical about its Christianity. In a separate claim made earlier this month, he said that the Conservative Party's big society was continuing Jesus' work. Now, this is remarkable, isn't it, that we've got basically Welby now working with the bankers to change the church. That'll be into big society. And I'll just bring in this comment here because, of course, David Cameron was singing, apparently, at the service where the Archbishop of Canterbury, Welby, was present. So he's been there as a cheerleader. But let's just make sure people realise what's going on here. That David Cameron's big society is the work of Jesus. I'm not comfortable about this at all, but just bring in the other aspect. So let's, here they are, here's the bankers with the head of the Church of England. And of course, somebody started to mention Tony Blair. So we better bring in Sandy Miller, Holy Trinity Brompton, Nicky Gumbel, and that leads us through to the Alpha Course. The Alpha Course, Common Purpose for Churches, and here's the Tony Blair Faith Foundation in the middle of it. And of course, he's another Christian. He's done great Christian works right away across the world. And we shouldn't forget this little organisation buried in the background, because I think this is another key part of big society. And what are they doing? They're transforming government and structures. So no problems at all there.
No, not at all.
Well, there is one problem because the church recently covered up the exposure of this story. Teresa Cooper, who with other ladies was abused as a young girl within the church care system. It was reported in the Mail. The church for years refused to acknowledge the abuse. Pretty appalling. And then they announced, when did they announce it? Oh, they announced that their guilt when we had the Hebdo shootings.
Conveniently buried under a mountain of headlines there.
Yeah. And of course, we've got the business that social services refuse to cooperate. Now, we've seen this sort of stuff in the States as well, Patrick, haven't we? That fingers have been pointed, particularly at the Catholic Church, but also at the US government, saying that child abuse is covered up. Why do you think this happens?
Well, in terms of the Catholic Church, this is well documented. And in America, the big worry is liability and lawsuits and the amount of money that would have to be paid out if this went to trial, and also the tax-exempt status of churches. There's institutions like churches are all under fire, are all under pressure, and the government, there's a very strange relationship between government and religious bodies in the United States. A lot of it has to do with money.
Right.
So that's a big motivator as to what happens and what doesn't happen.
Well, okay, let's just bring in this lady, the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, because we're saying that there's still no proper response from her on the subject of the Metropolitan Police officer that blew the whistle on the cover-up of abuse, child abuse by the British government, by senior police, by social workers, by local authorities, and by some of the major charities that claim they're there to help children. This is your angle. These people very frightened. So what they did ask us is what time the policing minister, Mr. Penning, was mentioned in the audio, and they weren't interested in the little girl who was dead in the gutter. So this is the quality of Britain's new Home Secretary. But this takes the biscuit. Now, I've decided not to give the name of the press officer that I'm corresponding with, because I'm going to say I believe the individual's been quite fair with me at the moment. What I think is happening is that the poor old media team are being given the dirty job by officials in the Home Secretary, in the Home Office. But this was an email saying that the Home Office can't access the audio file. So they've said that they can't seem to get it to work if they go to the website. And I said, no problem, I'll give you a copy of the audio. So I sent that over, and now they're saying that they can't actually open that audio file, and they want a transcript. So I think this is delaying tactics at the moment, do you think?
I'm not sure, but many other thousands of people have already listened to this recording.
But the Home Office, I think the Home Office employs about 15,000 people. I think that's the correct figure. But
I'm not sure what's going on here. But
they can't open a file.
But you're being asked to perform a task, basically, is to generate a transcript of a fairly lengthy interview. And that will take you hours to do, unless you're a very
somebody
fast
very
typer.
Kindly has done it for us. And
fast typer.
I understand that's already gone to the Home Office. But I'll read this very quickly. I did send them a reply, and I think it's appropriate to read this out. So, dear Mr. X, I have received your email below and find your comments simply not credible. The audio of the interview with the Met police officer has been publicly available for over 2 weeks and has been accessed by hundreds of thousands of people who are appalled to discover that senior professional people who have a direct responsibility for child protection have been covering up child abuse. Shocked feedback on this case has been received from police officers, legal professionals, child protection professionals, and many other members of the public who seem to have little problem listening to an audio interview. You now claim that the Home Office, with thousands of professional staff, is unable to listen to that same audio, and you now also claim that the Home Office is unable to listen to an audio tape sent to the Home Office directly. This is the same Home Office under Home Secretary Amber Rudd that claims it's using professional staff to investigate and bring to justice abusers of children. Clearly, this cannot be the case. Young children abused, neglected, and ultimately dead in the gutter, and the Home Office has now spent days puzzled over how to access a freely accessible public recording. Can you please put me in contact with the Home Office person now responsible for this case, and I'll be happy to assist them further. So that was the challenge, Patrick. What are we going to get back from the Home Office? I think my prediction is nothing, because they've got nowhere to go. Their backs are now against the wall. The lid has been blown. The British government is part of the cover-up of the abuse of children. And as I've said several times, the abuse is part of the blackmail of politicians to do the bidding of those bankers maybe.
The one part about this story that hit me really hard was listening to the police officer, and I had no idea of what the things that they have to go through and handle and deal with on a day-to-day basis. How you can do this for years on end, this job.
Without being damaged.
Working in especially those types of cases, that's a lot of stress. It's a lot of pressure. There is politics involved, and it goes right up the chain of command, as you've described here. That's an incredibly difficult job, and I think if you are working and doing a good job in the department, you need more support. You need to support your colleagues. You need political support.
Which, of course, this man didn't get. He didn't get any of that.
Then the system becomes dysfunctional if they don't have that support, because that is that's the most difficult area to work in. The most difficult.
Yeah,
I would say in the top two of everything you can do in law enforcement. That has to be one of the most difficult areas. And to do that for 2 or 3 years, 7 years, I don't know how many cases they work on, and
hundreds.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I had no concept of that before listening to that interview.
Well, we'll wait and see what happens. But if viewers and listeners want to know what training our police are doing, what better place to go than have a look at Police Scotland? And here we are. This was sent through to us, and it's the Police Scotland Training Academy. So we passed the Running Man Challenge to our new recruits at the Police Scotland College, and they didn't disappoint. So we've got a picture of police recruits, and what are they being trained in to do the Running Man Challenge?
Is that like dancing?
It's some stupid dance that the police seem to be taking up wherever they choose. But this is public money, public time, and Police Scotland, that don't seem to be too good on paedophiles, can do Running Man.
Is this a joke or is this real?
No, this is real. This is real, Patrick. Oh, this is real.
Those are real police officers dancing, and they're putting that out on social media.
Yeah.
So my question is, naturally, Brian, does that inspire a lot of confidence?
No, I think that what we've now got is training, reframing going on within the civil service, within the public services, which is reducing adults to childish antics. This is an attack on people's minds. It's certainly an attack on being professional. And let's contrast it. Mike brought this up. We've got this former footballer tasered and killed. There we are, former Aston Villa footballer Dalian Atkinson dies after being shot with a police taser. But we need to remind people that, of course, Theresa May has been instrumental in making sure that police are armed with the taser. And here we've got the Mail saying that children as young as 11 have been tasered. And the statistics mentioned there, 323 under 18s were fired on, tasered, in 2011 alone. That is a pretty I mustn't use that word, that's a pretty disgraceful statistic.
Yeah, and the numbers in America are right through the roof as well.
Indeed. Now, I'll add this to the slide here, because somebody said to us, just remember that taser is actually a brand name. So when the government says that they're giving the go-ahead for the police to use taser equipment, they're giving them unlimited powers of enforcement in terms of weapons. So this comment come in from a gentleman called Matt Waterman. The Home Department refused to respond to concerns and questions in that regard. And he also points out that Amnesty International declared regular tasers a weapon of torture back in 2008. So we're unleashing a weapon of torture, not on adults, on children. This is sick political mentality, Patrick. I'm almost lost for words as usual.
Well, the worst thing about the most oxymoronic, if not deceptive part of this story is that they use the term non-lethal to describe these taser guns.
Yeah.
And with the amount of deaths we've had over the years, how can you call it non-lethal?
Well,
it can kill people.
I have actually got a slide, which I'll bring up in a second, having a look at those threats. But just to emphasise the point, here we've got a report from NBC News. Parents consider legal action after South Dakota police taser an 8-year-old girl. Now, this story is that this little girl had a knife. The police claimed that she'd cut her leg, and then she was holding the knife against her chest. So they decided the best way of disarming an 8-year-old girl was to taser her. Is this common sense, or is something else at work here?
Definitely something else is at work, not common sense. But a lot of strange things are happening in America with regards to law enforcement and what they deem is to be the right course of action to neutralize the threat or to de-escalate the situation.
That 8-year-old girl, dangerous threat.
All too often, law enforcement's de-escalation involves escalation of violence and ends in death, in this case, many others.
Right. Well, this is the sort of comment you get around the taser. So the beauty of tasers is that you don't need expert training. That's quite a statement, isn't it? So these are some of the things that have been flagged up as the dangers. Of course, if one of the barbs hits you in the eye, you're going to lose an eye. So there's a risk of direct physical harm, but they can cause cardiac arrests or breathing can stop. And then we had the appalling case in Devon and Cornwall where the police tasered a man covered in petrol and he simply burnt to death. But the policeman didn't realise, if you mix fuel with high voltage electricity, you're going to get a problem. But it doesn't matter because you don't need expert training. That's pretty frightening. And who have we got advising on tasers? Well, thanks again to a viewer who sent in this to her. They've been listening to BBC Radio 4. There was a report on tasers, and we've said with help from tasers, because one of the people speaking was a lady called Abby Diamond. And why are we interested in her? Well, let's just have a little look. She's got an interdisciplinary PhD in research, criminology, sociology, law, quantitative, qualitative techniques from binary logistic progression to actor network theory. And no, don't laugh, Patrick, because this is serious stuff. And she's been exploring the use of the taser in England and Wales. I hope everybody's with me so far. And if you're not sure where she might come from, as it were, we can see here that she also received travel costs from, Taser International between the 2nd and 8th of November to attend the annual conference for the prevention of custody deaths. And she popped over to, Scottsdale, Arizona, just down the road, I think.
I just find this amazing. This is it's a corporate junket, basically, run by the taser manufacturer to explore deaths in custody. I mean, what part of this? I don't know what to say. Kind of speechless.
You're speechless. Well, let's follow it through. We're laughing, but of course, this is a terribly serious subject. So if you go online, you can find more about the background of this lady. She's got connections with all sorts of European organisations and NGOs. But I was fascinated to find the Amiga Research Foundation in here. Now, of course, everybody will be familiar with Amiga Research Foundation. If they're not, they should be, because here they are. They're an independent organisation looking at the use of really sort of weapons of torture by the police. And let's bring in their work if we can. Here we are. So what are they doing? Monitoring the international military, security and police trade in the pursuit of transparency and accountability. So never mind that Britain or America are torturing people in Iraq, for example. This is an independent unit. And we just check it's independent. It's always good to have a look at the funding. And where's the funding come from? It's come from the European Commission under the European Instrument for Democracy, very democratic EU, which is presumably why we've left. The Joseph Rowntree Charitable Trust, always behind the good initiatives for humanity. The Sigrid Rousing Trust. This is fascinating. This is, I think, a Danish lady who married a very wealthy gentleman involved in theatre and film. And they're now putting money in to make sure people don't get hurt by tasers. So this is all looking good. And I didn't have time to look at the Oak Foundation. So police being armed with safe weapons that kill people.
So this Abby Diamond, I'll just quickly flash back to the last slide. So it seems like she's a functionary of the industry.
Yes.
Because at no point in here, I see lots of talk of actor network scenarios and studying all the various nuances of what's going on. But where are the peer-reviewed studies on the risks?
Well, there was a doctor who did the major one who came from Birmingham Heartlands Hospital. I've spoken to him personally. And in his report, he said, well, basically the tasers are safe, apart from when they're not safe. But they're safe, apart from...
So they're okay.
Occasionally they might not be.
So they're okay until they're not okay.
Yeah. Who paid for the report? Taser did.
Taser did. So this is a fundamental problem of academia. This is the corporatization of academia.
Yes.
Right here, you've just outlined it, Brian. The same with the full body scanners, which they have in airports that use millimeter microwave. Now, we've had Pippa King, I believe, on this program and also on my program, talking about millimeter microwaves and some of the risks involved on a cellular level Where are the peer-reviewed studies on the full-body scanners at airports? Are there any?
No.
They're not. So we're human guinea pigs, basically. A whole generation, millions of travelers a day, human guinea pigs. So this is what academia needs to be doing. This is what Abby Diamond should be doing, is looking at the risks. And is there a safety? Are there health risks? Is this being used properly instead of being a functionary of the industry?
Yeah.
This is what we need people to do.
I personally would say to anybody who's going to get involved with this, let yourself be tasered. Now, credit to the doctor, when I challenged him and I said, have you actually been tasered? He said, yes, 6 times.
Wow.
And I said, and what was it like? And he said, well, the pain was exquisite. And I've got to reveal that at that time, I didn't realize that exquisite pain was a medical definition. I was worried that something else was at work there. But he said, yeah, he'd been tasered 6 times. And I thought to myself, what an idiot, because we are now seeing the risk. You can drop dead. Mm. Yeah. And there we are, on the back of fear and terrorism. We now have police who've got a weapon that can kill, but they're going to use it on children. Now, I owe you an apology, Patrick, because what I haven't got is the slide to cover the Chinese satellite. But
I can explain it for you.
Right. Just before I give you a few minutes to do that, I'd like to say that we've just been informed that the Home Office has acknowledged receipt of the transcript of the Metropolitan Police whistleblower. So Amber Rudd is now in possession of that transcript. We are the 16th today. We will now wait to see how many days it takes the Home Secretary to respond on this probably most critical of all the information that's come forward about Westminster child abuse cover-ups. So from that to the Chinese.
Well, we didn't have the slide, but China just launched an IT satellite, which is a quantum satellite. It's a GES system.
Right.
And this is basically the future of information technology. So it's a quantum array system using lasers with quantum entanglement encryption on both ends.
So this is a super secure satellite.
It's totally innovative, completely proprietary. And so they plan to roll out a network of these receiving and stations and maybe more satellites. So what I'm saying here, Brian, is China just passed the West in terms of one of the most important technological developments that you can possibly have, which is information technology. So if people are still thinking that China is a backward country and there's sort of an Asian backwater, you really have to come and wake up now and understand what the global marketplace really is and where the center of power is in terms of innovation, manufacturing, and the future. And I'll tell you, Brian, when you travel around Europe and when you travel around even North America, the majority of travelers you see, tourists, they used to be Japanese and Americans. Guess what?
Russians, probably.
No, they're Chinese. Chinese have the biggest middle class. They have disposable income. They will be running the world economy for the next 100 years. They have all the capital. If they pulled out of the world tourism market, right now, so many businesses would collapse, Brian. So America played this role for the last 50 years, and now China is moving into this role. That's a reality. And I think there's a lot of people still in denial of this. And the fact is they do have disposable income. They have a middle class. It's huge. And they have buying power. And they're doing the R&D, and you're seeing these developments like this quantum satellite. So we're playing catch up now.
Okay.
Chinese.
Right, Patrick, thank you very much for taking us through those items. We're just about at the end of time. I would like to say thank you very much to all of those viewers and listeners that pass in information to us. It's very valuable. Sometimes there's more than we can actually handle, but don't stop, because very often you give us key parts of the jigsaw. What we're trying to do at the moment is really to show people how the whole political and social and economic structure of UK is being taken apart from the inside. And of course, that includes now, as we're seeing, the destruction of the church. What's the aim of this? To leave people completely rudderless in the face of an increasingly chaotic situation. So we've got our own members of parliament to blame. That's where the rest lies. But of course, powerful figures behind the scenes pulling their strings and blackmailing them. Can we change it? Yes. How do we do that? We just need enough people to stand up and be counted and to say, no, we're not accepting it. Any last words?
We've done just about all we can do there.
Okay. Thanks very much for joining us. We will be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.